we'll only share snippets. We've been doing, our services have been pre-recorded and then played for folks. But we've also been putting some of the full audio calls of calls that we've been doing with our congregation so that they can kind of track along with what's actually happening. So
Great.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yeah, great. Super. Tell me a little bit about then what's going on in your all's world and how maybe things have changed in light of the past, 2 months. I feel like it all changed overnight.
Yeah. Man, a lot has changed. In some ways, a lot has changed, and in other ways, a lot hasn't. Mm-hmm. Because our ministry, well, my ministry in particular, currently is overseeing different teams that we've started in the last 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
My job in Innerchange is to actually scout out, explore, and then start new teams. So it's basically like church planting, but it's with ministry teams instead of churches. Sure. And so, we'll go into a place, decide if that area is where God wants us to be, if there's the right people, the right context, and if the Spirit is moving in that place for us to be there. Mm-hmm. And if we're being invited in by the local context and people, then we'll establish a team in that ministry place, which for Innerchange, that means that it meets some criteria. We always work in high poverty areas or places where people are struggling with poverty. And so all of our ministry teams are in those locations. For us, we kind of have 3 different aspects of our ministry that were already happening before, and now they've just had to adjust. Okay. So that's my primary thing, is actually overseeing those teams. So I'm doing a lot of coaching. I'm actually on Zoom and on Skype a lot anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
So that doesn't change a lot because I'm like, for example, the teams that I oversee are in Uganda, Ethiopia, Guatemala, Honduras, New York City, DC, so I've got, as well as Miami. Mm-hmm. And so I've got a lot of different pieces already that are not here, not local.
Right.
The other side of what we do locally here in Miami, a lot of that is more in person, obviously, and a lot of that is I'm doing a lot more of the like coaching and development and training for local churches and local pastors around how do they engage their community more effectively. Okay. How do they actually not just be a commuter church that comes in from outside, but actually can be part of the transformation and change of the community itself. And so a lot of that coaching and that training and that kind of thing happens kind of regionally. It's not only in Miami. I also do some things in Fort Lauderdale, but primarily in Miami. And we've partnered a lot with City to City, okay, which comes out of Redeemer Church in New York City originally, with Tim Keller and that whole group. They have a pretty strong presence here in Miami. And so I've been partnering with them because they have a lot of training for church planters in particular. And so that kind of thing has kind of hit the brakes a little bit. We've been doing some things online with them, but it's not the same as in person, being able to walk the streets with people, because a lot of what I do in those kind of coaching scenarios is actually teaching people how to engage their community, which is taking a new thing, a new turn, a new twist, obviously, is how do you engage your community when you can't actually gather, or you can't actually, be within 6 feet of people, or, so there's a lot more creativity in that aspect. So a lot of our local ministry has shifted to how do we support, especially our elderly or elder, immediate neighbors. So we've been doing a lot of things like, grocery shopping for people, or, I arranged with a friend of mine who has a print shop to do some masks. And so we're distributing those to people, especially the elderly in our community, so that if they do go out, they have, something that not only does the job, but actually looks pretty cool. Okay. So those are some of the things that that we're doing on a local, little things that we're doing on the local level. My wife, she's a trauma counselor, and so she obviously can't meet one-on-one with people to do that. So now she's shifting that to do more telemedicine kind of thing.
Sure.
So she's doing some counseling online, which has its own, whole different set of things. So she's been taking her time to do that correctly, to be HIPAA compliant and all that kind of stuff. But she's shifting towards that kind of a thing as well. So those are kind of the three different things: the Horizons, overseeing the new teams, the local coaching and training, and then for Erica, the trauma counseling.
Okay. That's great. So it sounds like you guys are really having your shifting and just kind of the creativity of what, how you do ministry there in everyday life is what's changed for you for the most part.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any kind of new opportunity that has come about with this change in the past couple months?
Well, I think one of the things that has been kind of on the back burner for us in ministry has been a lot of our training materials and curriculum and development, because a lot of, I'd much rather be face to face with somebody and, coaching them in person. And so like writing things down and like putting it into a form that's transferable has, that's something we've been working on over the last decade, really. But, how do we do that when the other things take priority often?
Sure.
Our personal time, our face-to-face time is the thing that really, grasps our heart. It's very real. It's people, and so sometimes the curriculum development and that kind of thing takes a back seat. So in this time when we can't do the engagement as much in person, I've been spending a lot more time in developing things, writing it down, kind of going back through all the stuff that we've learned over the years and trying to like consolidate it and put it. It sounds really boring, but it's actually really been a helpful thing for us, because it's been helping to remind us how we're doing things, helped us to like tweak how we're doing things. And like, I think it'll make our ministry stronger on the other side of this. Sure. Whatever that looks like, whatever our new normal will be. I think our ministry will be stronger actually because of this time. I get to spend a lot more time focused on reading, on development, on prayer, those kind of things that I do all those things normally, but not in as much concentrated time. Yesterday, I think I spent 4 hours on curriculum development, which I would never do.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic.
Life seems to be a little slower in some ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it just shifts the priorities, and so that's been what I've been trying to do, and that's not necessarily new, but it's just a shift in focus or priority that has changed because of the pandemic. Yeah. I think the other thing has been on a personal level, like in our family, just the intentionality. I think that's something that often also in our rush to minister to people outside of our family, oftentimes we let things slide on our own side, and I think that's important. It's one of the things that we've just been more intentional about. In fact, those two things coincide, because yesterday I was kind of rehashing an old training that I would do with our volunteers locally. This is something I developed like 15, 16 years ago. But it's pretty basic. It's pretty foundational, a theology of community engagement, community development from a Christian Christ-centered perspective. And it's something that I'm going to do with my kids and my family. I'm actually, like I said to Erica yesterday, man, this is like so foundational to what we do and how we do it. And I think we just assume that our kids get it. And they do to a certain level, because they see it and they experience it. but like the intentionality of saying, you know what, I actually need to train my kids on why we do what we do so they understand it, because, you know, they're teenagers, they're starting to really process, you know, future, like, what do I want to be about? What do I want to do? So actually discipling our own kids during this time has become a priority. Not that it wasn't there before, but it's become a higher
Kind of different.
time commitment. Commitment.
Yep.
So yeah, I would say those are some of the new things.
That's nice. That's awesome. Do you have a way that you would challenge us? How would you challenge us at Adventure, or, you know, those of us here in Louisville, just kind of still in our everyday routines? And I say that with whatever our everyday routines are now. How can we be on mission where we are here? Do you have any suggestions for that? Because you're kind of in a community, and you've got a mission there in Miami, even though you're kind of everywhere. So do you have any kind of challenges you would issue to us?
Well, I think that's difficult, not knowing your context. You know, I think each person has their own sphere of influence, and I think a lot of times it's not only your sphere of influence, but what we like to call a relational web. You know, like if you think about it, like I have a whole network of relationships that I have influence in, and I have the ability to communicate to or share, you know, what God's speaking to me. And I think that a lot of times we take that for granted. I think that's one of the things that this pandemic is highlighting, is that we've taken that relational network for granted. And I think also the interconnectedness of that network that each of us has. You know, for example, if I was to, you know, sit down with your family and kind of just map out the network, just relational network that each of you have, and to see how those overlap, but how many people you actually influence on a daily basis, you would be astounded at how many people you have influence over. And I think we as believers often forget that we have that much influence, or a possibility of influence in people's lives, and people that you would never even consider. You know, just the personal interaction, being intentional about being kind in our personal interactions. You know, I think about everybody who's now considered an essential worker, right? You know, checking out our groceries, and who are literally risking their lives to give us groceries. You know, those are people that deserve our smile, even though they can't see it through our mask. They can see it in our eyes. They can hear it in our voice. They can, you know, the way that we treat them, the way that we interact with them, the intentionality of that. I think that that's something that constantly has to be a reminder for us, is how are we intentionally sharing the love of Jesus with people on a daily basis, whether that be virtually like this, or in person, you know, from 6 feet apart, of course. But I think that that's very, I think that that's a big piece. The challenge really is intentionality, really thinking through who's your network of influence, and then how are you going to actually engage them in this time.
Sure. I think that's great. And you're right. I think during this time, we really have taken kind of those relationships, not for granted, but we just assume we're going to see those people tomorrow and be able to interact with them and have those same conversations. And I do hope that that's something on the other side of this that we value a little more highly, you know, that we can come to appreciate and set aside time for, and not be back in our busy mess that we can tend to be in. That's what I feel like, right?
Yeah.
How can we pray for you guys? What is there anything that this shift has caused for you all, or in your ministries? You mentioned in Ethiopia. Is that the spot where the school is looking at closing in Ethiopia?
Yeah, in Ethiopia. Man, I've got a really long list. On a personal level, you can pray for Erica, my wife, who has recently been diagnosed with Lyme's disease, as well as multiple other things that kind of compound on each other. So she is defined as immunocompromised, you know, and so we've had to be extra careful during this time, and that's really frustrating for her, especially. She's very much a people person and very much wants to be, you know, connecting, but this is kind of an extension of her having to slow down and rest. So you can pray for her health. That of course has all sorts of financial implications for us as a family as well. And so you can be praying for provision on that level. And, you know, in a time like this, when a lot of people are losing their income, then that also affects their giving. And so our income has also taken a hit on that. Thankfully, we've had some other supporters like step up and say, you know, we want to give extra, and they've done that. So we're okay at this point. But long term, I think that's a thing to be praying for. Sure. As far as ministry outside, man, the teams that I work with, our team in Ethiopia, thankfully the pandemic has not hit there hard yet. At least they haven't tracked it as much there. They've only got like 80 cases or 90 cases in the country, but if it takes hold there, it'll be catastrophic, because, you know, people in poverty have to rely on community on a daily basis in order to survive. Not just, you know, like somebody works today, they eat today. Right. So if you're not able to work, then you don't eat. Right. And that's the situation for all of the people that we minister among in our teams. Like, that's our situations, you know, here in the US, and specifically in some of our communities, we have at least somewhat of a safe, but in those cases, there is no safety net. And so there's a real concern about those situations. Our team in Guatemala City works in the dump. There's about 30 other NGOs that work in that community, but our team is actually from the community. They're Guatemalans who grew up working in the dump, who came to know Jesus. Amazing story. I actually put it in my last newsletter. But their stories, Fito and Nancy, they've stayed. The other NGOs are all gone. And so that leaves our team there, one, very isolated, two, suffering the same deprivations that the rest of the community are suffering, and three, you know, just figuring out how can they minister effectively, while at the same time trying to survive as their family. You know, their kids are there, everything. It's very difficult. So, and even their extended family is all there. So, you know, in our team in Honduras, you can pray for them, because they live up on the side of a mountain where water and food are scarce anyway. But now in the middle of this pandemic, you know, it's very dangerous to even be able to go get the food, not just because of the pandemic, but because of the gang control and violence that they have to constantly kind of work through. And of course, the black market is working overtime in this situation. So, very volatile situations for all of our teams. So just pray for our teams themselves, that God would provide for them so that they can stay in their context in ministry. And in which case, because of the style of our ministry, staying in their ministry context means staying home, because they live there. This is not like, we don't commute in, we actually live in the places. And so you can just pray for that provision for them. And then also, how did they minister effectively in this time? And man, we have some very creative missionaries. I'll just say that. And they're doing some really great things, but it's not easy. Yeah. So
okay. Well, I'll pass those on, and this of course will be pass through our church so that they can have these prayer requests as well. Anything else you want to share with us at Adventure today?
I just want to say thank you guys. You guys, I mean, we haven't been able to come and visit for quite a while. It's been several years now, and your faithfulness and giving has been a bedrock for our support. And, we're grateful to you guys, very thankful, and wish that we could visit you. And in fact, I was just thinking about that the other day, of wanting to take a East Coast road trip after this is over and be able to come by and visit. But yes, just grateful for all of you. Some of you I know, some of you are brand new, and I haven't met you before. But I want to say thank you for your giving and for your prayer and for thinking of us at holidays and all those things. Those things are very they're very special to us, and it makes us know that we are loved and cared for.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you for your time. We definitely at Adventure want you to feel like one of the family. So we want you to feel like you're coming home when you come to Adventure. So however we can continue to support you and as a family, just let us know, because we want to do that for you all. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's anything else, just shoot me an email or let me know. And I'd love to do this more. I want to keep in touch and hear how things are going. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I hate that it took a global pandemic for me to Zoom call. But that's
that's what it does sometimes.
That's right. That'll be one of the cool things that I'll be like, I Zoom called with Michael. So
yeah, there you go.
All right. Thanks so much.
All right.
Have a good one.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.